Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and welcome to my 2023 Honda Civic Type R. I've put 1,100 miles on the car so far, and we're gonna do a little commute because although some of you guys are buying these or want to buy these as your dedicated weekend fun toy, track toy, all those types of things, it's also still a Honda Civic at the end of the day, which makes it a really practical commuter. And so I am literally commuting home from Boston Motorsports because I just wrapped up doing a little bit of work here. So I wanted to take you on some real world roads, not just my little curated drive, and talk about what I like, what I don't like, how it compares against the Civic Si that I did 13,000 miles in. We'll talk about fuel economy, but it's winter. You're noticing I'm out in a t-shirt right now. It's like 50 degrees. It's unseasonably warm here in New England, and I put this car on snow tires. We've got Bridgestone Blizzak WS90s on an 18-inch wheel. The offset is plus 32. They just fit in these wheel wells, which is pretty cool. They look really good, and they're a very cheap wheel. They're from Tire Rack, but they kind of look like TE37s. It's the poor man's TE37. First, you're going to notice that my championship white car is absolutely filthy. And this is just what's going to happen, guys. I'm sorry. I cannot be clean all the time because I am living in the real world. And I did purchase this car to be my daily driver. Now, that doesn't mean I don't take care of it. We've got the car paint corrected, ceramic coated, the front end is PPF. We're doing some rust prevention measures underneath. And this is the best part about this car, is that you get to have an incredibly capable package that is still just a Honda Civic. I wouldn't really say that like that because I think it's belittling to the car, because it is a great car. And this now sort of fills the gap that my M3 left. Because the Si, while a fantastic car, an excellent commuter, it did not have the chops that the M3 had. And this car very much does. This car like really fills in that void of being an incredible sports car day to day. It's just that it's front wheel drive, which is a new experience for me. You might be a little overwhelmed by the insane inventory here at Boston Motorsports. This is not a paid placement, but I'm just always shocked when I when I drive in here. You never know what's going to be sitting out here in the lot. So let's talk about the ride quality first. As a daily driver, as a commuter, does it stack up? Does it make sense? Does this just work as a track toy? It is firm. It is stiff. It is not stiffer than the insanity that the M Division has been installing upon the world. So in that regard, I don't think it's too stiff. In another regard, I'm also on an 18-inch wheel right now, which means I've given myself a bit of extra sidewall. I think that's pretty critical for this car. On the 19s in the winter, this would be really brutal. I don't think I would enjoy it quite as much. And I do have a lot of confidence that I can go over a lot of crummy bumps and lumps and potholes with this tire setup. I do appreciate the rigidity of this chassis on the highway. We'll get to that in a minute when we get out there. But in terms of visibility and drivability, it's still a Civic. While being wider, for sure, you need to keep an eye on that track. It's still really easy to navigate where each corner of the car is. I don't feel like I'm gonna hit curbs. I don't feel like I have to worry about where people are. It's really adaptable and it's very easy to drive. Oh, I love that blinker on a completely one-way spot where there's definitely no other place to go. Not a local. We can turn right on red after a stop. Wheel spin, and even with traction on, Honda gives you a bit of slip. This is a no left turn on red. People always run this, it's crazy. So I like that they give you a bit of slip because it doesn't just cut the power, it lets you ride it out a little bit, which is really nice. Honda seems to understand their audience a bit, but it does mean that you need to be aware that you can induce pretty severe understeer while doing that because it's a front-wheel drive vehicle. Like so. To be able to collect this much speed without a lot of revs is really valuable to me as a commuter, as a daily driver. Because in my E92 M3, which seems like a crazy comparison, but I spent 6 years with that car, while I loved that S65 V8, it was high strung. It's an 8,000 or 8,400 RPM redline. It required a lot of revs to go anywhere. It was actually kind of difficult to commute in the M3 because it felt slow most of the time. That DCT, which I owned, was always trying to keep you in the highest possible gear, I assume for fuel economy. So you'd find yourself having to drive it essentially in manual mode all the time, just so you could have some power and torque at your disposal, which meant that you were burning a ton of fuel. In this Type R, I'm at 72 miles per hour at 2,600 RPM, and I can lean into the throttle and have an appreciable amount of acceleration, which is just incredible. I love the gearing, I love the torque, and I love the response from this engine. Of course, there's a little bit of lag when you're this low in the revs with that turbo to build some boost, but it does the job. Now, road noise. Road noise is present, and it is present in a way that it was not present in the SI. The SI was not a quiet car, but it was acceptable. The Type R, if you're somebody who really doesn't like a lot of road noise and just wants to have an insulated cabin with your pure sound of a sound system blaring at you, this is probably not going to do you very well. It is loud. It does have a lot of road noise, and part of that is due to these tires. I'm on a Blizzak, so you know there's a lot of big airy tread making noise and all that stuff. But even on the PS4Ss, which are also kind of a loud tire, you hear everything. So, all right, well, I guess everyone's just moved to the left lane to hang there versus to make any passes, so we will just appreciate a reasonably slow middle lane. Okay. Boston has just become the 4th worst commute in the world. Not in the country, in the world. Everyone always gives LA credit for being the worst for traffic. As far as creature comforts go, we have an infotainment system that should be very familiar because it's very similar to that of the SI, except for the fact that the Type R gets navigation. There was no navigation in the SI, which you'd think doesn't really matter because you have Apple CarPlay anyway. Who needs the addition of a navigation system? Well, I have found some glitches with Apple CarPlay, and I have not really pinpointed it. I'm going to let you do it. You're going to do it anyway, so I'm going to let you do it. I haven't really pinpointed if my Apple CarPlay glitches are my phone or the car. See, this is bad signage. They say it's an exit only. It's actually not an exit only for that. It's an exit only for 95 up there. Poor signage, not your fault, 4Runner, if you're not a local. When I'm using Waze lately, sometimes it just scrambles. It gets all scrambled up, it looks goofy, and if I just hit home and go back to Waze, it's fixed, but then, 30, 40, 50 seconds later, sometimes it's scrambled again. Other times it takes 5, 10, 20 minutes or never, and it just works. I don't know if it's because I'm on an 11 Pro or if it's because the software in the car is having issues. I also encountered a situation where, if you'll notice, I can see what I'm listening to here, my podcast, and it will also show me if I'm on CarPlay and I'm looking at Spotify. I can say, hey, what am I currently listening to? Those should match. I had it not match the other day where this would not change. It was just showing a song that I was not listening to, and this was changing. Odd stuff, not crazy important, but distracting nonetheless, and annoying when you're just trying to use the thing in your car that's supposed to make it safer and easier. CarPlay. That's the whole thing. So I never really saw those issues in my SI. I did see the Waze scrambling issues occasionally in the SI, but very, very rare. Okay, that aside, I do love the infotainment system of these new Hondas. They're really easy. I can jump into my trip computer. I can see my previous trip. I got 30 miles per gallon, 30.8. Right now, we're doing 23.9. We'll accumulate a little more, which brings me to fuel economy and range. In my SI, with that 1.5 liter turbo, I was able to achieve 40 to 43 miles per gallon most of the time. Over the 13,000 miles I owned that car, I averaged over those 13,000 miles 40.0. Okay, technically when I returned it, it was 39.9, but it wasn't until that last miserable drive in Boston traffic where I lost that 1/10 of a point. So it is pretty impressive that you can get that out of the SI. I have not really been able to achieve more than 31 out of this Type R, and I think with any reasonably spirited driving, you're going to be looking at 27 to 29 with a lot of highway. So unfortunately, the range in this car, now when I fill it, is about 373 miles or something like that against the 475 miles that it would give me in the SI. Not a huge difference, but if you're somebody who really hates going to the pump, if you're somebody who's trying to get every last MPG out of the cars, you're going to have to do that. Now, there's no change in fuel because they both require premium 91 octane. In Massachusetts, that's difficult to find. For the most part, we have 87, 89, and 93. So I'm still putting 93 in this car for, you know, the reason of always going above the minimum. It can run on 87. I don't recommend that. If something recommends 91, you should probably just use 91. It's going to be better for it in the long run. So we talked about ride quality, but what about comfort? These seats are nearly Porsche carbon buckets for the poor man. This is as close as I'm going to get to that option. And they are actually very comfortable, very supportive. I have some lower back issues, not just because I run a lot, but because I probably sit with a terrible posture and all kinds of things. So I do find that these can sometimes exacerbate that, but they do have good lumbar support. And despite the fact that they're not adjustable in a lot of ways, you can put them forward, back, you can lean them, and you can lift it. I found myself sort of like lifting the seat up a little more than I usually would, just for the sake of keeping my back in check. But Chris Harris, of all people, who's usually very critical of seats, really loves these seats, and I have to agree with him. I think these are phenomenal seats, but if you're not somebody who loves a stiff seat, if you're not somebody who likes a supportive seat, you're probably going to want to buy the SI. I think the SI seat was actually a better commuter seat, despite the fact that these are still very, very good. The response to this car has been pretty good, but it's still been a little bit if you know, you know. I don't know why. I expected that when I bought this car, it was going to be a neck snapper. Everybody was going to have to take a look at my Type R. And while people certainly do, it's not an Aventador. Like, normal people probably see like, wow, that's a weird Civic, or why did he put that silly wing on the car? It's a Honda. But people who know, any car enthusiast typically gets excited about seeing the car. So that's been great, but it has not been a neck snapping experience where everybody in a CRV has to take a look. I'm a dedicated lover of cruise. Oh my goodness. Accord making some very strange moves ahead. Okay, don't really understand that. Back to my point. I am a dedicated lover of cruise control. I don't like just having to rest my foot on the throttle constantly. Some people love this. Some people hate cruise control. What I don't like is adaptive cruise control, because it always slows me down rather than allowing me to carry my speed and just make a safe pass. So I always turn off the cruise control AAC, the adaptive, or ACC, adaptive cruise control. To do that, it's very simple. You hold this button down, it will turn ACC mode on, or hold it again, turn it off. I like to turn it off. I like to just hold my speed, and then I use this to regulate that speed. I find that to be really relaxing. And Honda has really nice lane keep assist. And it's not just a lane keep assist, it kind of self-drives. It does a really good job of holding the lane. It uses a camera up here. My Civic SI had the same thing. When you switch, it does not switch lanes for you. You're gonna have to do that, and then it'll tell us, hey, it found the lane, and it's gonna do its thing. this is really convenient because there's times where I'm just like, hey, you know what? I don't recommend taking your hands off the wheel. I'm not recommending it. But if you need to just have a second where you're like unscrewing a bottle or, you know, something that would otherwise make you drive with your knees, I do find this to be really valuable, especially the way I commute on long highway drives. It does not have auto-sensing wipers. Again, kind of good with that. I don't necessarily like auto-sensing wipers, especially because they're often really difficult to turn off in certain cars. It's just a staple of the thing. And they always just go overkill. They're always way too fast. So I like that there's a really simple windshield wiper method in intervals that make sense, easy to control. The best feature of the Civic Type R, of course, is the handling. This chassis is fantastic. We're on Blizzak, so we don't have a ton of grip, but we have safe grip. It's not just gonna waste away on me like a scary PS4S in the wet cold. But again, not really that wet, not really that cold. I'm pleasantly surprised by the gearing because the SI was turning quite a few more RPM than this at 75 miles per hour. I love that this is under 3,000 RPM at highway cruising speed on an American road. If you're in Europe, you can go ahead and brag about your unrestricted roads and how you just drive at redline in 6th gear all day, and that's great. Good for you. That's good. But for me, I don't want to be taxing this engine, and I also trust this 2-liter more than I trust the 1.5-liter. Not that the 1.5-liter is necessarily unreliable, but I know that it's a little weaker. And for a lot of folks who are buying an SI, they are also interested in tuning their cars. They want to make more power. They want to be a hot boy racer with their new toy, their new Honda. I was never going to do that, and because of that, I'm pretty sure I would have been able to get 200,000-300,000 miles out of my 1.5-liter turbo. However, in this car, I do feel like I'm taxing this engine less, and that it will just last forever, especially if I don't tune it. And that's the beauty, is I don't need to tune it. I know that I have enough power to do what I need to do on road and track. And that's one of the best things about this car, is just having enough torque and enough power, more than enough power than you need in order to get the job done. And I really appreciate that about this car, because I was very used to screaming onto the highway in my M3, and I missed that. I missed having that ability to kind of place the car where I wanted it. So for some of you, commuting and daily driving a Type R is sacrilege. To me, that is exactly what this car is for. It's the ability to have a really capable track car that I can go out and enjoy on the weekends with my friends and not be embarrassed, and enjoy driving. It's not going to feel like a big heavy lump, but also the convenience of a Honda Civic. It's still, quote, just a Civic. And that is what I love about it. I can commute in it and feel guilt-free. I get reasonable fuel economy. I don't have to go and service an expensive German V8, but I'm getting most, if not all, of the benefits of those types of cars. Depressing that nobody really knows how to use a lane, and I'm just forced to do this. Everyone just kind of sits in the left. This is what a typical commute in Massachusetts looks like. Oftentimes the right lane ends up being the fastest lane. It kind of sucks. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any questions about living with the Honda Civic Type R, feel free to comment below. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.